Marcus wiped his hands on his work shirt as he walked into the elegant restaurant, his palms still bearing the stains of the day he'd spent under car engines and transmission fluid. At 48 years old, he'd never felt quite comfortable in places like this, with their white tablecloths and hushed conversations that made him feel like he didn't belong. But his sister had insisted he needed to get out more after his divorce, and when she handed him a ticket to this charity auction dinner, he couldn't refuse her hopeful smile. The hostess pointed him toward a table in the back, and Marcus navigated through the dimly lit dining room, feeling the weight of every eye that seemed to judge his worn blazer and honest face. As he approached table 7, he noticed it was already occupied by several well-dressed people. A woman with soft blonde hair that fell in gentle waves around her shoulders sat gracefully in a wheelchair, positioned perfectly at the table's edge. She wore a pale blue dress that matched her warm smile, and her eyes held a light that Marcus had rarely seen in his lifetime of honest work and simple living. He almost turned back, thinking he'd made a mistake, when the hostess touched his arm and confirmed this was indeed his table. Marcus felt a familiar flush of embarrassment rising in his neck as he took a seat directly across from the woman in the wheelchair. Up close, he could see she was probably in her early 40s, with an elegance that came from more than just expensive clothing. The woman extended her hand with genuine warmth and introduced herself as Catherine. She asked him his name, and when he said Marcus, she didn't look away or offer the pitying expression he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, she seemed genuinely interested, asking what brought him to this event. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't minimize himself or deflect with humor. He told her the truth about his auto repair shop, about fixing engines and solving problems with his hands, about how his sister worried he spent too much time alone. Catherine's response surprised him completely. She leaned forward with real curiosity and asked what he loved most about his work. No one had asked him that in a long time. Marcus found himself talking about the satisfaction of hearing an engine purr back to life, about the trust his customers placed in him, about how a single repair sometimes meant someone could get back to the life they needed to live. As he spoke, he noticed Catherine nodding thoughtfully, and something in her expression suggested she understood what he meant in a way that went beyond polite listening. When Catherine began sharing her own story, Marcus learned that her father was the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company. But she spoke about it with affection rather than pride, explaining how his work had once seemed more important than anything else in his life, until the accident that had confined her to a wheelchair 5 years ago. That tragedy, she said quietly, had changed everything about what her father valued. She'd been a dancer before the accident, and she described the grief of losing that identity with an honesty that made Marcus forget about his own insecurities. What struck Marcus most was how Catherine didn't seem bitter about her circumstances. Instead, she talked about discovering new passions, about building a foundation to help people adjust to life-changing injuries, about finding joy in unexpected places. She asked Marcus about his dreams beyond the repair shop, and he found himself admitting things he'd never told anyone. How he'd always wanted to teach young people the value of skilled trades, how he believed society had lost something important when it stopped honoring the people who built and fixed things. Throughout dinner, the other people at their table seemed to fade away. There was the wealthy businessman discussing investment portfolios, the philanthropist talking about her latest charity gala, and a retired judge sharing stories about his grandchildren. But Marcus and Catherine existed in their own sphere of conversation, where what mattered was genuine connection and the recognition of something real in another person. When dessert arrived, Catherine's hand brushed against his as the server placed plates between them. Neither of them pulled away. They sat with that accidental touch lingering for just a moment longer than necessary, and in that small gesture, Marcus felt something shift inside him. He realized that he'd spent so long thinking about what he lacked, about his rough edges in his simple life, that he'd never considered that those things might not be failings at all. Catherine told him about a young woman who'd recently come to her foundation, a girl who'd been in an accident and lost the use of her legs. She was struggling with depression and couldn't see a future for herself. Catherine paused, then looked directly at Marcus and said that she thought someone who understood the value of restoration might be exactly the person this girl needed to talk to. Would he be willing to volunteer to help mentor young people learning to rebuild their lives as they rebuilt themselves? Marcus said yes before he finished thinking about it, and then asked if perhaps Catherine would want to grab coffee with him sometime to discuss the program further. She smiled, that same warm smile she did all evening, and gave him her phone number. As the evening ended and he helped her wheelchair back on the table, he felt like he was experiencing his own kind of restoration. Something inside him was being repaired, something that had been damaged long before his divorce, long before he ever fell out of place in a fancy restaurant. Over the following months, Marcus began working with the foundation. He met Catherine regularly, ostensibly to discuss the program, but really because he simply wanted to be near her. He taught young people who'd lost the use of their limbs how to work with their hands in different ways, how to find purpose through creation rather than being trapped by limitation. And Catherine watched him work with these young people, watched how his natural kindness and practical wisdom transformed lives, and she fell for him the quiet way that happens when you see someone's true character revealed in action. One evening, after a particularly moving session where a young man had built his first wooden box with Marcus's patient guidance, Catherine and Marcus sat together in the foundation's courtyard as the sun set over the city. She told him that 5 years ago, after her accident, she'd thought her life was over. She'd imagined she'd never fall in love again, never feel truly seen by another person. Then Marcus had sat at the wrong table, and everything had changed. He reached for her hand, and this time it wasn't accidental. Marcus, the mechanic with stained hands and a humble heart, had learned that life's greatest affairs aren't always about engines. Sometimes they're about finding someone who recognizes your value exactly as you are, and allowing yourself to be found in return. Catherine had spent years helping others rebuild their lives, but meeting Marcus had taught her that sometimes the restoration works both ways. In a world that often judges people by their appearance or their circumstances, their story became proof that kindness, authenticity, and genuine connection can bloom in the most unexpected moments. And it all started with a wrong table and the grace to sit down and truly see another person. I would truly appreciate if you could like this story.